You are looking live at the Richmond International Raceway, site of today's Federated Auto Parts 400. Cashing tickets is what it's all about. So let's head to the studio for today's edition of Racer's Odds. Here's your host, John Roberts.
And welcome, everybody, to yet another edition of Racer's Odds. This is your number one source for the information and statistics you need when wagering on NASCAR's top series. We have put together a panel of experts, including handicappers and racing experts, to make sure you make the wise wagering decision. With us tonight, the editor of Point Spread Weekly, Steve Makinen, and championship crew chief, Jeff Hammond. So, guys, when it comes to wagering on NASCAR, that's always intense. But now the action on the track, being that this is the second race of the playoffs, it's part of a three-race mini-season right now, and the anticipation and the excitement is through the roof up at the Richmond International Raceway, Jeff.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys right now that are already sweating bullets. There's only one person that's really liking what's getting ready to happen up there, and that's Martin Truex Jr. Big win last weekend in Las Vegas for him. But the rest of the field, even though they got a little bit of cushion, they don't feel totally safe yet, because you got to realize one thing. Richmond is Richmond. The next weekend of the cutoff race is the Roval at Charlotte, and everybody is dreading that. They don't know what to expect because the track's been totally redone. But tonight, everybody's really got their eye on what they need to do as far as tire management and getting the job done here. A lot of pressure on a lot of teams.
So your odds-on favorite opening up the weekend was, of course, Kyle Busch, and he stayed that way. His odds have moved just a little bit. And, of course, Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, and Martin Truex Jr. are up there as well as favorites. Kyle Busch is now bet down to 2.521. Now, one of the best things about this racetrack, Steve Makinen, is the fact that this is one of those that is pretty friendly to the handicapper and the bettor.
Yes, it is. Happy Saturday, guys. And it figures to be an even happier Saturday evening, as Richmond actually has a handicap ability grade of A- on my scale, meaning it's very conducive to statistical handicapping methods. Typically at this race, there's not a lot of calamity. 5 guys have DNF'd in the last 3 races here. That's not a real big total. With it being short track, drivers tend to get past a little bit easier. They tend to group into different laps back type of patterns. So you'll get not a whole lot of position movement within those groups. So as my guy Brent, who led us off, likes to say, this race could be about cash and tickets tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone's going to cash in big time when it comes to getting a win and perhaps moving on. And anybody who wagers on that driver is going to be happy as well. So Brad Keselowski is your pole sitter. He opened up at 8-1, and his odds remain 8-1, despite the fact he will be starting first. That's a great place at a track like this, even better than others. Brad Keselowski is starting up front, and he wants to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to take control of this race and just own it as long as you can. Is it important? You know, kind of like I was saying earlier, I'm not sure that it's a must do. I think if you're good, if you have a great car, you'll be able to recover from it. But sure beats any of the alternatives. There's not a better starting position. And we want to maximize it. I think that first pit stall is going to be really big at some point in the race, and we'll certainly try to use that to our advantage.
So now, Jeff Hammond, if you look at what he's done so far in the playoffs, only one race, but this team battled back. So chances are, and odds are, if you're wanting to look at Brad Keselowski, that number one pit stall selection, but also what the team's done lately has made him a pretty good bet.
Well, when you look at his overall record at Richmond, he's pretty darn decent, but it has been about 10 years since he got his one and only win here at the racetrack. But what he's done as of lately, this team fought back last week at Las Vegas. They were really bad the first 2 stages, and they finally rallied back to finish third. And I feel like they're bringing some momentum in here. This is a racetrack where he's always been pretty consistent in the top 5. So Brad's got a great opportunity right now, since he's on the pole, to take advantage of that. Not only, as far as leading this race, but when they come down and get that number one pit stall, as far as their pit crew's concerned, if their crew does a good job, they could keep that number 2 car up front all night long and enhance his opportunity to win this race.
Yeah, definitely one of those drivers you don't want to bet against. Want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, as we go on with the show tonight, you will see at the bottom of the screen a ticker that has individual odds for a driver to win the race. There is a star by the names of the drivers that are involved in the playoffs. And also we have a countdown clock to green flag, which now sits at just a little bit over an hour before the action gets underway at the track they like to call the action track. So Brad Keselowski's, we said, opened up at 8-1 and remained at 8-1. But Steve Makinen, it certainly is not the case with some of the other drivers. We had some pretty big movers this weekend.
Obviously the practice and the qualifying results here have a lot to do with the moves. Being short tracks, like I indicated this earlier, you get out front and you stay on that lead lap for the entire race. That gives you a huge advantage. Easy to see guys get lapped here, and that's a lot of the reason these guys fall back.
So only 2 cars going to the back of the field after pre-race inspection. That, of course, J.J. Yaley and Bubba Wallace. They'll start at the back of the field, and you'll see their names appear in some of the group matchings that we have later on in the program for you. But right now, we want to go to the racetrack and check in with Pat Patterson to see the latest from Richmond. Pat?
Well, good afternoon, Johnny, Jeff, and welcome to Richmond Raceway, where tonight the Cup Series will have an absolutely perfect night to go racing here in the capital of the Commonwealth. This will be round number 2 of the playoffs, and as you can see, I'm standing right here with the exit of turn 2 over my right-hand shoulder. Maybe the toughest place on this racetrack when it comes to racing around here for 400 laps, 300 miles, which is exactly what they'll do tonight. Stages tonight here as far as the way we'll break the race down. First stage, 100 laps. Second stage will be 100 laps. And then, of course, 200 laps to finish up the Federated Auto Parts 400. Let's talk about what the buzz is in the garage. For the most part, it's all about tire management here at this track. The pavement's worn out. You can see how gray it is in the background, and it really eats up the tires. These guys have got to be really smart about that tonight. In terms of who are hot picks are the guys that they're talking about in the garage. Well, the guy that had the best 10-lap average run in the final practice was Denny Hamlin. Hometown hero, always runs well here. No reason to think that he's not going to be a factor here tonight. Brad Keselowski has the pole position, and he stole it away from Kevin Harvick, who had a very, very good lap here, and is always a guy that you have to watch on the short tracks. Again, keys to the race as far as where I'm sitting, tire management tonight, and the biggest thing, we talk about this every week, don't beat yourself on the pit road. Don't make mistakes there. Make sure you get on and off that pit road as smoothly as you can tonight here at Richmond.
Okay, Pat, the thing I want to know, can JGR, Joe Gibbs Racing, can they sweep this weekend? And after last weekend at Las Vegas, you know what happened there? Can Kyle Busch be the driver to get it done, even because the odds maker thinks he is?
Yeah, I think that after last week, after what we saw from Kyle Busch last week, no reason to believe, who is the odds-on favorite here tonight, that Kyle Busch will come out swinging and hitting on all 8 cylinders. He's got a great car. He's got a great record here. In fact, if you want to talk about records and kind of how things normally flow here, I think that tonight you'll get a winner out of the top 5, and those guys are Brad Keselowski, Kevin Harvick, Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch. As far as dark horses go tonight, you know, we talk about Gibbs and their dominance. I honestly believe that Eric Jones may be one of the guys to keep your eyes on tonight. Don't forget, next week we go to the Roval, and guys like Jones and Clint Boyer, they have got to have big nights here at Richmond. Restarts will be ferocious tonight. And if anything's going to really upset the apple cart and produce a first-time winner this season, I believe it's going to come from the restarts. But no question about it, when it comes to great racing, you can't bet against the Gibbs cars here at Richmond. It's, like I said, a perfect night. Right over there, turn 2, that's where you're going to see a lot of action here tonight. Look forward to seeing just exactly who can guess the best and get it done tonight at Richmond. Next week, we'll be at the Roval in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jeff, Johnny, you guys have a great night. Enjoy the racing from here in Richmond.
Pat, thank you very much. Certainly a lot of action to come, but right now let's take a look at the playoff grid and where these drivers are sitting in terms of trying to make it on to the next round. Now, these are 3-race mini seasons, what we look at. We'll get down to round of 12. 4 drivers will have to go. So one of the movers, Steve, that I was looking at earlier, Eric Jones moved in the opposite way from the odds maker's perspective, opened up at 16-1, dropping down to 25-1. He is the farthest back at 26. No one's ever come back from that position to make it to the championship 4. So is he somewhat in a must-win situation? Is 25-1 a good area to go with him?
Yeah, I would think so. He's call it a must-win situation, but I don't like that particular motivating factor. You're at the bottom of the standings for a reason, I guess. He had a bad run last week. He hasn't shown that great of speed so far in qualifying and practice. So I think any type of wager forced on Jones because it's a must-win situation might be a foolish one.
So, Steve, start us out with your pick of the week. What's the bet you like the best this week?
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to go right back to what we just talked about because I like Chase Elliott against Eric Jones. Chase Elliott's a short minus 140 favorite. Now, I say short because typically you look down the odds board and you see minus 140. People get sort of scared of that. But think about it in the same lines of you're laying 2.5 to 3 points in football. That's not a real big margin. So minus 140, good price on Elliott. He's shown great speed here this weekend. He normally doesn't do that heading into these Richmond races. Obviously coming off a great run last week at Las Vegas. And he seems like a guy who could be ready to put it together here.
Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, you saw your playoff calculator there to the bottom right part of your screen. That tells you what a bet of $1.50 would do for you there. So, Jeff, you got more than $1.50 on the line here. We're putting you on the spot. What's your bet of the week?
I'm going to kind of stay with the Eric Jones theme, but I'm going to go in a little bit different direction. I'm going to go with Kyle Larson versus Eric Jones, and Kyle Larson's at plus 135. And when I look at the numbers right here, you know, Kyle comes in. He's had 4 finishes of 7th or better here at Richmond. He's got 17 points to the good after an 8th place finish at Las Vegas, while Eric Jones in around the 16, not so good. We've already talked about it. He's minus 26. I like the fact that I think Kyle Larson, he'll hit that high lane tonight, and he'll be tough to beat. And I think Eric Jones, because of the pressure, he makes a mistake. He doesn't do that well.
All right, here's the bet I'm looking at, guys. I think that Brad Keselowski, not only with that first pit stall selection, that's going to pay off huge dividends, but even though he's matched up against one of your tougher drivers and the guy that's already won his way into the second round, I still feel there is good reason, number one being the qualifying and also the pit stall selection, why I like Brad Keselowski at plus 130, the underdog, to Martin Truex Jr., so there's some profit to be made there, but also at the same time, a little later on in the program, I'm going to tell you one more reason why this number 2 car is particularly intriguing this evening, and it has to do with practice. So we're going to grab us a quick break. When we come back, we're going to explain everything behind the simulation that Steve Makinen does each week, and also going to continue to get you ready to go racing and wagering at the Richmond International Raceway. Much more of Racers Odds is coming up.
As states have begun the legalization of sports gambling, the entire sports landscape is changing.
I think we're going to see more and more states fall in line, and this gets legalized across probably all 50 states.
And so is the way you listen to Sports Talk Radio. I'm Brent Musburger, and on the Vegas Stats and Information Network, we follow the money and the games. It's sports talk you can bet on. So check out VSiN. Odds are you're going to like what you hear on Channel 204 and streaming on your phone or at home on SiriusXM connected devices and speakers.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSiN, changing the way you watch sports.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now, 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
It's more Racers Odds.
And welcome back once again, everybody, to Racers Odds. I'm John Roberts. This is your number one source for information and statistics to help you make a wise wagering decision when it comes to NASCAR's top series. We're available, of course, on PRN, VSiN, but also NASCAR.com, SiriusXM, just to name a few. We're easy to find, and we're here to help you find those good values when it comes to wagering on NASCAR. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to check out the editor of Point Spread Weekly, Steve Makinen, as he does his simulation every week. And Steve, what all goes into these simulations? I know you run a bunch of them, but what all goes in? What factors make you come out with those numbers that, boy, the records on them are pretty dang good?
Yeah, so my simulation is built from, if you want to say, 6 different statistical factors, and they're handicapping averages, I like to call them. So I don't take exact finishes. I use a kind of a handicapping curve to kind of grade races for guys. And what I do is I run these simulations through. I develop an overall power rating for each team and driver based upon how they do at a certain track, how they do it at track group, and how they've been doing recently. And then what I do that on Tuesdays, get that in Point Spread Weekly. And then come the weekend after the practice sessions and qualifying is done, I will update it with those results. And it tends to change dramatically if certain guys improve or decline a lot from where they were originally projected to be. So I take that overall power rating, I throw it through a simulation or a random number generator, and I run it 1,000 times, and it comes up with some pretty good results.
And before we have talked about, how you look at some things, and sometimes you like to try to factor in momentum. How do you go about taking that momentum? For example, Martin Truex Jr. and even like a Kevin Harvick right now. Both these guys right here have got wins recently, but they've been running strong also.
Yeah. So actually, the momentum factor is 2/6 of the simulation. So it does make a difference. There's 2 different factors that go into that: how they finish and how they've been running. And again, if a guy's running real well, say 9 races and then the 10th, it doesn't go as well, I tend to throw these fluke results out. So the hotter they're running, the better they're typically doing on the simulation. So
are you trying to say basically you might be take the high number and the low number, throw them out and to work with the stuff in the middle? I love to give the formula, but yeah, it's something similar to that. Okay.
All right. So what did the simulation tell us this time around, Steve?
So we have a group of 6 drivers tonight that are kind of projected to separate themselves. And ironically, the top 4 in the simulation tonight are the top 4 that finished last week. Harvick's projected to win, but not as wide of a margin as last week he was. Keselowski, Truex, Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, and then Hamlin. Then there's a little bit of a drop off to Clint Boyer in 7th, the potential surprise there. And the highest finishing non-playoff driver, Austin Dillon, 14th place.
Okay, very interesting. So some of those guys have won at this track. Some have not won in quite some time, but still, nonetheless, there are drivers that are hungry. And Steve, I know you can't. I mean, hunger does not make a car go faster. But is there any way you can put in that emotional thing? You can put in somebody's back being against a wall?
Again, these are things I tend to try to avoid in other sports when I'm handicapping, and I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. I think it's more a matter in this sport of whether the team's clicking and things are going together or not. Having your back against the wall means they haven't been doing that lately.
No, when I see something like that, I mean, it's like last week at Vegas. Everybody wants to say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I think there's a couple of drivers that really would like to be able to do that. Kyle Busch for one, but also Clint Boyer, because I really believe, they got off pace a little bit. They got a few things went wrong, and they kind of lost their handle, I think, and they started, fussing and carrying on the radio. And those kind of distractions do not help fix the problem. They create more problems, and they don't allow, your emotions to let you feel the race car. That's the one thing I always worried about as a crew chief, is trying to keep my driver as calm and cool as possible, because he's too busy being up on the chip. He can't feel that race car and tell me what I need to do to fix it.
Yeah, you said it, and that's not even touching upon the whole Kyle Busch situation. Obviously, that got out of control, and he may be pressing more than usual himself because of all that happened last week at Vegas.
So, Steve, let's now take a look at championship odds. It's got to be one of the hardest things to handicap when you look at a championship in NASCAR's Top Series right now, because it used to be you could kind of look at somebody trending throughout the year and what they might do, but now we have these little 3-race mini seasons, and somebody can get tripped up. We saw Kyle Busch. Yeah, he only lost 8 points when he came in with a 44-point advantage. He only lost 8 with a bad run because of the way they rallied back, but this has got to be one of the hardest things ever. Still, he comes in at 3.5 to 1. This got to be a very difficult thing, even with your simulation, to handicap.
Yeah, well, typically, these types of odds are built up upon a power rating and overall rating for a driver. So they basically reflect the ratings of the drivers currently. Now, the interesting thing about the NASCAR playoffs is the way the schedule of the groupings go. You look down at that last playoff round, and Texas, Phoenix, those are Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch tracks. I would expect one of those, or both of those guys, to win those 2 races, or be at least very competitive to the point where they sort of solidify themselves for that run at Miami. In my opinion, looking for 2 other drivers, and it'll be whoever can win that 3rd race, and then maybe a surprise driver.
No, and I think what you're saying right there is pretty much sums it up. That's where a lot of people are already taking they're not trying to get too far out in front of themselves, but they're already looking that far down the road because they want to get by these first 2 races. This is a tough round, but it's also an easier round to make up ground if you've got a fast race car. So guys like Kevin Harvick, they want to win, but the main thing is they wanted to come out of Las Vegas in a comfort zone so they could go ahead and get to Richmond, hopefully put some more points on the board and take those insurance points they've already got. And if something happens bad at the Roval, they're still, in enough of a safe place that they can go ahead and advance. And that's one thing we haven't really talked a whole lot about tonight. Watch these guys that are up front. Once again, these stages are relatively short. Guys can make 100 laps. It's trying to get those stage points because that's the most valuable thing they've got going on as far as the commodity for a lot of these drivers, especially guys who are below the cut. They need to score stage points.
Yeah, this is typically a track where guys who are out front are going to get those stage points unless you take a chance and maybe a 2-tire stop or something like that, and that's going to hurt you in the long haul. But if you get those stage points and maybe protect your playoff position, it can change some things.
Yeah, and 3.5 to 1 on a guy like Kyle Busch, there's still going to have to be some serious things that come together for him to win the championship. So maybe not the most value in trying to pick a championship and a championship winner at odds like that. So we got to take us a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to get into the head-to-head matchups and tell you exactly who we favor in some of these head-to-head matchups and which ones you probably need to stay away from because of recent trends. Stay with us, everybody. You're watching Racers Odds, and we'll be right back.
You didn't think he'd put down the microphone completely, did you?
Greetings from Las Vegas.
Well, neither did we. Hear legendary broadcaster Brent Musburger on the Vegas Stats and Information Network.
I never told my wife how much fun I had when I was staying here for about 3 weeks. Oh, it's terrible living in a casino. It was the greatest 3 weeks of my life. This is the only book in town that's open 24 hours.
There you go.
Make that bet around 4 o'clock in the morning.
You don't need a dress code. Pajamas are good.
Brent Musburger on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. Sirius XM Channel 204.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. It's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSIN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSIN, changing the way you watch sports.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now, 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
We're back with more Racers Odds.
And welcome back, everybody. John Roberts with you, along with Jeff Hammond and Steve Makinen. It is now time for us to dive into the head-to-head matchups. And right off the bat, guys, in our first group of head-to-head matchups, we have probably your two favorites. The simulation favorite is going towards Kevin Harvick. Kyle Busch is the odds maker favorite as far as one individual driver goes to win the race. But Steve, what do you make of Kevin Harvick as a plus 110 underdog to Kyle Busch?
Kevin Harvick in an underdog situation at this point has to have tremendous value. It doesn't matter who he's going against.
Okay, so there are interesting matchups here in this one, very close. When you look at Denny Hamlin, he's matched up against his teammates Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. In both those situations, let's remember, guys, that Denny Hamlin had the fastest 10-lap average out of the cars on practice that made 10 consecutive laps. So that's one to look at there as well. But also, Martin Truex Jr. was the driver that won this race. Last time we raced at Richmond, he won in the springtime, and he feels like this time around that may not be any type of advantage because of the competition level.
I would say that that race was a long time ago. A lot of people learned a lot of things, and we'll have to see who's gotten better and can we keep up with them. So we'll wait and see. But I felt okay about our car speed wise. We just got to get it driving a little bit better.
So if Martin Truex Jr. just feels okay about his car, then that brings us back to, again, Steve, another Kevin Harvick underdog situation with Truex. Well, actually now it's bet down to 110 to 110. What do you think of that matchup?
Yeah, I hear you go with against Truex in your play of the week here, and interesting trend on Truex this year. He's won 4 or 5 races. After the previous 4 races after he's won, his average finish is 20.8.
Interesting.
His normal average finish is 10.9, so that's a pretty significant drop, showing that they typically don't handle prosperity that well.
Jeff Hammond, when you look at the matchups of this group number 1, anyone stick out to you?
Well, I was going to add one more thing about that Martin Truex Jr. situation is the fact that the win he got in the spring here was the first short track win of his career. I mean, he'd gone 80-some races to wind up winning his first short track race. So it's not going to be easy, and I like the fact he's being realistic. Everybody has gotten better to this point as far as the season's concerned. We've got some players right now that were nowhere in contention the first race here at Richmond, so it will wind up being an interesting battle. Don't underestimate him, but it doesn't automatically give him an advantage.
So let's move on now to our group number 2 of head-to-head matchups. That's where we find our pole sitter and a guy who started the weekend out at 8-1 odds to win the race, maintained himself at 8-1, but you got to look at him having that number 1 pit stall, the record he's had over the years at Richmond. Brad Keselowski is one driver you do need to look at, guys. But before we get into these head-to-head matchups, let's check in with Brad, because he warns us that if you're looking at a driver that may fall back early, that might be the driver that's not going to make it back up front.
If you look at, I think it might have been this race last year, I think I qualified 30th, and Kyle Busch was right beside me. And between the two of us, he got up a little bit faster than I did. I think he was in the top 3 or 4 in 100, 150 laps. So if you get long runs, it becomes an easy track to pass at because, the mechanical grip is pretty low, and you really got to drive the cars, and the aero grip kind of evens out because everybody's in traffic. So on the long runs, I think there's a fair amount of passing, but certainly having the patience and discipline for that to be realized is tough for us as race car drivers. But there's never a track you want to start in the back at. So don't get me wrong there, but this isn't the worst that you could.
Yeah, you never want to have to come back. But one thing, when he talks about long runs, guys, that you got to take into consideration of these 10-lap averages when you're looking to pick your driver or one against the other as to where they're starting. We've had 3 short track races this season that have gone green 100+ laps towards the end. This has been a pretty clean and green season, Jeff. So take that into consideration when the drivers are talking about long runs.
No, and I say that's what I was saying about, as far as these runs and these first stages and stuff, and Steve brought it up. This is not a racetrack that's known for a lot of calamity. It doesn't mean tonight might not be different. It depends how crazy everybody feels like they are and how much pressure they're under and what they're trying to get accomplished. But the thing is, you can expect long green runs, and you've got to do tire management. Pat Patterson pointed that out. This is going to be real important that you don't get excited, even if you're leading this thing. If Brad Keselowski gets out there and burns the right front tire off of it, trying to pull out and get away from everybody, or he gets into traffic and you get a lot of these guys that are back there in the back that don't want to get lapped start becoming, 2 and 3 wide, not wanting to give the leader an opportunity to get around him. You can use up a lot of your good stuff and wind up, next thing you know, you could be the one that could possibly get lapped. So it's a very unique race, and the driver has a big input on how much you use your stuff up early on.
So the veterans, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., we certainly find that matchup pretty interesting. Steve Makinen, any other matchups here that you would particularly gravitate towards or stay away from?
Well, I think you touched on an interesting point when you first brought this one up with Harvick and Keselowski. Interesting line movement here. Even though Keselowski is on the pole, the line actually moved from Harvick -135 to Harvick -150. And that's pretty telling, if you ask me. And if you look back at this season, Kevin Harvick actually has a 20-7 record in driver rating against Brad Keselowski this season. So I think that line is warranted. I think probably if you want to call them like the experts, maybe know something on this one.
What about Denny Hamlin, Jeff Hammond? He is one of your hometown favorites. This is his hometown track, and also he has a great record here. And let's not forget that he is the one during somewhat limited practice time this weekend because of the schedule. He was the one who recorded the best 10-lap average. Finds himself paired up against Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano, and those are two that have Denny as the favorite in both of them.
Yeah, and I can't really argue with that. I mean, that's the thing you got to worry about Denny Hamlin. He's a really solid short track racer. He puts up good numbers no matter whether we're racing Richmond or Martinsville or even Bristol. So you got to realize and respect that. And the main thing is, I think it maybe is helping him also for whatever reason. I think some of these handicappers are looking at Joe Gibbs Racing and saying, hey, they won this race in the spring. They just won Las Vegas. Maybe that's some of the influence we're seeing with some of the separation right now. I think it'll be a great battle, but you got to understand, I think there is a certain amount of advantage that Brad's got over Denny is one thing has to do with that number one pit stall. I mean, it's just going to be a variable tonight. It's going to keep rearing its ugly head when we go down pit road.
Yes, which again makes Brad Keselowski at 8-1 to win this race tonight. Very interesting. Steve, as we take a look at the third group of matchups that we have, we notice for the majority it is guys involved with the chase, couple non-chasers in, playoff drivers in on this one. But you talked earlier about the movement so far this weekend of Chase Elliott.
Yeah, he's showing more speed here. He typically doesn't show the speed coming into the weekend that he has this weekend. So I think it could be a big factor for him. He drives well here, and if he has the speed going in, I think it could be a big contributing thing to him having a nice run tonight. Comes off a great race, Las Vegas. He actually led the series with 37 of the fastest laps last week. So seems to be coming together for that team possibly. And I'm looking at him as a potential guy that could shake things up down the road in the playoffs.
What about Al Mirola? He's your challenge this time around, isn't he? The odds makers challenge.
Yeah, he's showing some good speed here tonight, and I'm going to challenge you guys here. Let's put him at a position 12.5 or 12, let's say. Almirola, over or under 12?
I'm going under, guys. I'm going under right away. Just got a gut feeling about that, but also with his record and how he's overdue. The team is picking up somewhat, and I believe that he could definitely finish better than 12.
Boy, after it's he's had 2 top 10s in the last 5 races, but he's had 3 finishes of 17th or worse.
Up or down?
And I'm gonna say over. I'm gonna say over.
Okay.
I'm saying over. I think he's gonna get in a hurry. He's gonna wear his tires out. I say over.
All right, so Steve, just to keep it fair here, you need to write that down, and we'll see who's correct about that.
I'll keep it right here in my mind.
Okay, yeah, that's where we need to keep the score because so far this season, there's somebody that's dominating the other guy in the odds-making challenges. I don't quite know who it is. But, hey, got to grab a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to start looking at some of these group matchups. Sometimes group matchups are very difficult to pick because of who's in them, and you have to defeat 3 other drivers to get any money out of the whole thing. But we'll take a look at some of these groups, and this time around, there are a couple attractive ones. Stay with us. We'll tell you which ones we feel where there could be some wise wagering. Stay with us.
The Edge, only on the Vegas Stats and Information Network.
How you feeling? I'm feeling good. How you doing, bro? I'm feeling good, man. How you doing? How you doing?
The Edge, weekdays 3 p.m. Eastern.
The Raiders have made some sensational headlines, but I don't think you or I or anybody who seriously handicaps the NFL saying, yeah, the Raiders are going to be a playoff. I'm talking about public, more about public team, especially in Vegas with the excitement with that team going to be here in 2020.
Only on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. Sirius XM Channel 204.
It's crazy. Yeah, it is.
Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSiN, changing the way you watch sports.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
It's more Racers Odds.
And welcome once again, everyone, to Racers Odds. Want to remind you at the bottom of our screen throughout the program, you have your countdown clock. Time to the green flag right now, about 36 minutes. And also, we're going to tell you where you can find the race. Tonight's race is on NBC, SN, MRN, and SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. And also, we have individual odds for drivers scrolling across the bottom of your screen. And also, you will find the playoff drivers with a star next to their name, and you can see what their odds are to win the race. So when we talk about group wagering, when you bet on these 4 drivers, you pick your driver and where the odds are. That tells you you'll get a cash payout if you pick the driver that finishes ahead of the other 3. So you have to be pretty confident going into this one. Let's take a look at our first group. That, of course, is Group A, and it features a lot of the favorites. Kevin Harvick up there, as well as Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin. This has moved a little bit on Denny Hamlin since the beginning of the weekend. He opened up at plus 265. Now he finds himself paying plus 235 if he can finish ahead of those three drivers. And we are all wondering, and we're going to hear from Denny now, as to whether or not a great practice will translate into a great race.
Yeah, I felt pretty good with it. I thought that we had, a couple, decent runs. I thought that, really there's 5 or 6 other guys that are kind of right there, pretty close. And so I don't anticipate a runaway. If we do, it'll be a great change of pace. But I just looking back at the spring race here, we had to start last for qualifying deal, and it took the entire race to get up to the top 5. It's amazing, how much aerodynamics plays an effect on such a short track like this. But it is very, very tough to pass, and so it's not impossible, but certainly it's tough. So it's just if you get back in the pack, if you make a mistake, you will not win this race. There will be nobody with a speeding penalty come back and win this race. You can mark that down.
Yeah, and Denny's not the only driver that is saying that, and other crew members are saying that as well. So when you look at who you might be wagering on tonight, you also got to take into consideration how well their pit crew has performed throughout the season and also in the first playoff race. So Group A has Harvick plus 235, Truex Hamlin the same way, and Joey Logano, Steve Makinen. What do you think? Is Denny Hamlin the guy in this group, or are you leaning towards somebody else?
Well, interesting that he said 5 or 6 other guys. It's almost like he got a hold of my simulation before I sent it out, because that's what I had. But this some heavy hitters, obviously, in this one. I don't see a whole lot of value. Now, the only thing I could see is if you like Kevin Harvick in this race and you're worried about a guy like Kyle Busch or a guy like Brad Keselowski as opposed to these other options, this could be a good option for you to wager on Harvick.
Yeah, not a bad one here in terms of, but once again, Jeff Hammond, if you look at this, in order for you to get that payoff at a plus 235, your driver that you pick has to defeat, or has to finish ahead of 3 other drivers.
No, but I like what Steve's thinking right here. You've got some guys that could potentially win this race, and you don't have to beat Kyle Busch to be able to wind up winning and beating this group. So there's a couple guys that are out of here, including our pole sitter. So, you got an opportunity. If you feel like there's some weak sisters here, now's the time to take advantage of it. And, it could work the other way around. You could be a Denny Hamlin fan, and you're seeing how he is as far as the 10-lap average, thinking, well, it could wind up being Denny's night. He's won here before. And if he doesn't get caught speeding on pit road, he could wind up being the guy that could, kind of mess everything up.
Let's move on to Group B and take a look at some of the drivers in this one. Of course, Steve, you've talked about Chase Elliott and the movement so far this weekend. He's been one of your movers, and he started out opening up at plus 245 all the way down to plus 155 after this group. So not paying out as much as these other drivers, but there is good reason for that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, Elliott's the only guy in this group that I have as a tier 1 driver for this race. So I think there's still even some value at plus 155. Obviously, Kyle Larson, Jeff talked about him before, could have a good run. He could, but again, top group of drivers. I got Elliott in that group. I don't have the other guys.
Group C features some. They're all playoff contenders. Kurt Busch leading the way there at plus 150. Ryan Blaney, Almirola, talked about him just a moment ago, and William Byron as well. Now Byron spun at Vegas and was able to work his way back up. And when you talk about strategy, let's not forget that he has the veteran crew chief Chad Knaus on the pit box. So William Byron at plus 365. What do you think of that one, Steve?
Well, this is interesting to me. I have a trend on Kurt Busch. I went back after he crashed out last week. I went back and looked at how he does after he DNFs. And going back 2 years, there's been 5 occurrences. His average finish in the follow-up race is 7.2. Pretty impressive number.
Yeah.
His normal is 12.4, so it's a 5-position improvement on that. He tends to bounce back well. Maybe there's a greater focus with him, being a veteran. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a pretty nice run tonight.
So, Jeff, Group D is featured. What, sir?
Well, I was just going to ask Steve. One thing about when you're talking about Kurt, when you look at what's going on coming in here, he's not had a lot of really good races as of late here at Richmond. I mean, he's had 3 races in a row that he's 11th or worse. So I'm just wondering if he can bounce back here at this particular track. I know what he's saying about the numbers, but here at Richmond, he's looking like, he needs to have one of those 7th place or better nights because he is 14 points below the cutoff line. So they need a big bounce back. If your trends are proven right, but may not be Richmond be a good place to come and do
it. Point taken. That's some of the instincts you have for this can overshadow the numbers easily. So we'll tread lightly on that one.
All right, Group D. Jeff Hammond, you got two playoff contenders and 2 non-playoff contenders here. Daniel Suarez, Jimmy Johnson are in the middle. Ryan Newman and Alex Bowman. Who do you like in this one?
Not really anybody jumping out at me. I mean, if you want to look at somebody who's been pretty tenacious when it comes to this particular racetrack and his style of racing so far this year, you have to look maybe at Ryan Newman. He's won here before, but more importantly, it seems like every time that they drop the checkered flag, he's been able to somehow or another, no matter how bad he qualifies, they fight their way back up in here, and he gets him a good top 10 finish. So he would be the one I would be looking at. If anybody in this group has been able to rise to the occasion, that would be Ryan Newman.
Steve Makinen, Group E. If you like Austin Dillon at all, there's a pretty good value here going off at plus 400, opened up at plus 225.
Well, yeah, ironically, he's the only non-playoff guy, or he's the highest non-playoff guy on my simulation, and he's got the longest odds here. So there's some fuzzy math. Could be some good value at plus 400. I definitely see lesser options than him to choose from there.
Yeah, true. And also plus 400, put a buck down, get 4 back.
The last time, though, John, I got on Steve about thinking he went the wrong way. I agree with you 100% on what you just said about Austin Dillon. When you look at what he's done as of late here at Richmond, he's not always been pretty qualifying, but he's been able to get back and finish in the top 10. I think he's had 2 sixth-place finishes back-to-back here at Richmond, so he could be one of those guys that could surprise you. Good racetrack for him.
All right, Group F, as we take a look at this one, some of your lesser, we don't know as much about some of these drivers as we do in what they may turn out here. Steve, when you get to these lower groups of drivers that are starting further back in the pack and don't have quite the records to fall back on, is this a group, is this an area you may just want to stay away from as a wagerer?
I'm, in fact, not going to stay away from this one. I like a particular guy here. Michael McDowell has shown some good speed this weekend. He's starting to level way. This is a track where guys get lapped pretty quickly. McDowell can stay on that lead lap a lot longer than the other drivers on this list, I believe, and that's going to give him a good shot to win this grouping.
Little help. Bubba Wallace is going to the back of the pack if that helps you on this group.
Well, yeah, it's what he's saying is exactly right. And again, Steve, you've been looking at my notes or something because I'm right there with you, my friend. I like the way he qualified. I talked to his crew chief the other night, Drew Blickensderfer, and they are very optimistic. They're coming up here with a really good car here, as well as next week going to the Roval. They're looking forward to these next 2 races. Even though they're not in the playoffs, they could wind up being somebody that you overlook and you could take advantage of. Look for him to have a pretty decent night.
Yeah, could be some serious value in that one. Also, maybe a little value in the other one with Austin Dillon, too, if you feel as if he can defeat those other 3 drivers. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll give you more reasoning behind our best bets of the week and also take a look at some of the other options that are out there for you as a wagerer as we head into this second race of round 1 of the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. We'll take a break here on Racers Odds and be right back.
Gone Racing. They're still wheel to wheel. The weekly NASCAR show that gets you ready for this week's big race and more. Oh, yeah. Take a ride with us to Victory Lane on Gone Racing.
We just got these lines last night. It was plus 700 on Brad Keselowski. He's already down to plus 550, so I think we know where the money is.
It's going that way.
And that's where my money would have been, too.
Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern on VSiN, Channel 204, and SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90.
Great job. Hi, this is Doug Rice of the Performance Racing Network. Whenever the PRN crew heads to Las Vegas, we always stay at the South Point Hotel and Casino. You know, it's our home away from home. The South Point features great restaurants, free parking, and they go out of their way to make race fans feel welcome. So when you make your plans to visit Vegas and attend the South Point 400, it just makes sense to book into the South Point. The South Point also offers fantastic room and race ticket packages. Make your reservations now at southpointcasino.com.
Get ready for every NASCAR weekend with VSiN's Point Spread Weekly. Editor Steve Makinen runs a simulation prior to every NASCAR Monster Energy race. He takes into account driver, team, track type, speed at practice, and more. The simulator is run 1,000 times and results are in Point Spread Weekly. Be better informed. Be better prepared. Enjoy NASCAR more. Point Spread Weekly. Subscribe now. Log on to vsin.com/subscribe. VSiN, changing the way you watch sports.
If you suffer from heartburn or other digestive-related disorders, then there is a new, safe, better, and natural alternative to better digestive wellness and heartburn relief. Praxid not only provides relief of heartburn, but Praxid takes a 360-degree approach to support better digestion, protect you from harmful bacteria, and also balance your stomach to improve digestive functions.
To order, call now 1-800-829-5735. That's 1-800-829-5735.
Are you ready to celebrate the thrill of victory and cash a ticket even on defeats? Make Point Spread Weekly a part of your prep for all the games. Baseball, football, golf, NASCAR. Point Spread Weekly. Sharpen your edge now with the help of Matt Humans, Dave Tooley, and the rest of my guys in the desert. Point Spread Weekly gets you ready with exclusive handicapping stories backed by proprietary data you won't find anywhere else. Go to vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe for Point Spread Weekly.
We're back with more Racers Odds.
And welcome back once again, everyone, to Racers Odds. This is your number one source for the information and stats you need to make wise wagering decisions on NASCAR's top series. A little more than 20 minutes before the green flag at Richmond. This is race number 2 of the playoffs. And if you don't believe that the playoffs are intense, all you got to do is listen to the drivers after race number 1 of the playoffs, and that'll tell you how intense this whole thing is. And it's always intense when it comes to wagers. So Steve Makinen, let's go back to you right now and check back in on some of the movers up and down that we have seen so far. There's been pretty much movement this weekend.
Yeah, there's been some guys that I actually projected to do a lot better in qualifying and practice sessions, and they just haven't done it. Chris Buescher, he's the biggest downward mover this week, 8 positions down to 25th. Alex Bowman down 7 spots, and then Kyle Larson. Larson hasn't shown the speed going into this race that he typically does at a place like Richmond. In fact, my early week things had him as the pace setter in happy hour. So he didn't show that this week. We'll see how that affects his performance for this race.
And also, Steve, something we really like to look at is your better than normal, worse than normal as somebody coming into a race, because, when you just look at the overall stats, sometimes people are trending in different ways, and that gets you your better than normal or worse.
Yeah, the better than normal guys, coming off of last week, maybe not better than normal, but typically these guys aren't as high on the simulation as they are this week. Keselowski and Chase Elliott are the guys to watch for in my mind. And then the worse than usuals, Joey Logano, haven't really even touched on him much in the show yet at all. That shows you how sort of irrelevant he's been so far this weekend. And then Eric Jones as well.
All right, so those are the trends that we've seen: better than normal, worse than normal. Jeff Hammond, do you agree with what's on there, that some of these guys are going to perform that way from a gut feeling?
No, I'm going to look at it, a little bit more as far as where they qualified and their 10-lap average, and feeling like sometimes, they may be, trying some things up there at this racetrack, because we never know how much their laps they got on their tires and what they're exactly feeling as far as the balance of the car. But, for Kyle Larson, for example, that's one of the reasons I'm a little bit scratching my head on him. He qualified relatively decent. I'd like to have had a little bit more speed, but, we've seen these guys looking for that trimmed out car that balances the way they want it. And that's the thing. Sometimes you'll give up a little bit in a qualifying run, because you got to realize you don't get to work on the car once you get through qualifying. And sometimes it can be a little bit deceiving what this team is willing to give up to be able to have their car where they want it in the long run. And it can really make you kind of chase things. But I believe right now that he's one of the guys I'm going to be watching to see whether or not he can hang on there and move forward like I think he can.
All right, so this is the last Saturday night race of the season. It's also one of a couple of short track races that are left, and it finds itself sandwiched in the middle of the first 3-race segment that's going to determine who moves on to the round of 12. So right now, we're going to go back to something we talked about at the top of the program, and that, of course, being our best bets of the week and really what's behind them, why we like these, why we're interested in them. So Steve Makinen, editor of Point Spread Weekly, start us off, sir.
All right, I'm going to stick with my best bet of the week here, but I also have a second one I want to kind of touch upon because I was very close on these. Chase Elliott over Eric Jones is the matchup I kind of like the best. He's actually 19-8 on driver rating against Eric Jones this week. So this is a type of track where driver rating and your overall performance at this track is closer to your average finish than other tracks it could be. So 19-8 in that. He's 5-1 in his last 6 finishes against Jones. So he's been hot. He seems to be putting it together. I think this is a good time to ride Elliott.
Okay. So Jeff Hammond, you are up next, sir.
Well, I'm going to stick with my group, and my group was Eric Jones and Kyle Larson. And I'm going to still say the same thing. I feel like, Kyle is going to start in front of Eric Jones. Eric Jones is going to be pushing. He's 16th right now in qualifying. But more importantly, in the last couple of races, Eric Jones here at this last 3 races at Richmond, he's been outside the top 10, while Kyle Larson has 4 finishes in 7th or better. And he's got a little momentum on his side. So I feel like, it's going to really boil down to if Kyle has got his car balanced out like it needs to, I look for him to move forward. Eric Jones may be pushing a little too hard. He could wind up having trouble again tonight here at Richmond. So I'm going to stick with those that matchup tonight.
Okay, so there's a couple reasons behind the one we really like here, the matchup between Brad Keselowski and Martin Truex Jr. Steve had said earlier that Martin Truex Jr. averages almost double of his finishing position from 10th to 20th coming off a win. That's not his best races, but also one of the trends this season, almost to a fault, has been a lack of cautions. We've seen a lot of green flag racing and a lot more green lap finishing in closing out a race, and therefore that's really going to favor long runs, and also it's going to favor the guy with the best pit stall selection because we're going to see green flag pit stops. That, of course, goes to Brad Keselowski as well. One other thing that we like to look at that can kind of tell a big tale before you go into the race weekend and the race itself is that 10-lap average. But here's one thing about Brad Keselowski's 10-lap average. It was late in a run. When it comes to the laps that were the fastest, the 10 laps were the 35th to the 44th. He was on the racetrack. He was faster at the end of a longer run. So once again, I know it's a toss-up. Martin Truex Jr. can be the winner at any time. This is kind of a tough one. But, guys, still, for all those things put together, I still favor Brad Keselowski in that matchup.
Good enough.
All right, so odds to win here, we got Kyle Busch at 2.5 to 1, Harvick at 5 to 1, Brad Keselowski at 8 to 1, and then you see Truex Jr. there as well at 5 to 1. Steve Makinen, if you were going to have to pick a driver to win this thing, would you go on the shorter money with Kyle Busch, or would you go on some perhaps a longer shot?
You know what? It doesn't feel to me like Busch is ready to win yet. I'd go a little deeper. I think that group of 6 that I had are all capable of winning, and with Harvick being as hot as he is, it took a almost a perfect pit stop adjustment last week by Truex to keep Harvick from victory lane, and that might not happen this week. I think Harvick has another good chance to win tonight.
Yeah, when you talk about hot, Harvick has won 3 of the last 8 races, and in those 8 races, that also includes a couple top 5s, but one of the most impressive things, though, is running second to Martin Truex. I don't think anybody's going to catch him, but for Harvick to do that shows that he is on a hot streak, and this is a good racetrack for him, Jeff.
No, it is, and like what Steve was saying, you got to look at the guys that keep coming back, and even like somebody like Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin, has had some bad races, but more times than not, he's been able to recover just like he did at Indy after they crashed right there on the very last lap of practice. They kept pull the backup off, and they come out of there with a 6th place finish. This guy's good here at this racetrack, so he could easily wind up being a spoiler. So I like what Steve's saying. I believe your winners are going to come out of that top 6, and the thing is, Kyle Busch, as good as he is here, is he ready to go out there and reclaim his title and as being king of Richmond like he has been in recent years?
Yeah, and not only just for consistency's sake, because we've talked so much about him. I'm thinking if you do have to go for a winner right here, that at 8-1, Brad Keselowski looks pretty, pretty attractive in terms of getting some payback.
Are you trying to talk yourself into it?
No.
Okay, I'm just.
I'm
wondering.
already ready
you
for it.
keep going back, and you're going back to Brad and hanging on to him awful close. Is he your whoopee tonight, or is that what it is?
Well,
he's your blanket.
He's just the guy I like the best out of this whole thing. Steve Makinen, thank you very much for the input tonight. We sure appreciate that. We also want to say a big thank you to Pat Patterson. Big thanks to NASCAR.com, PRN, VSiN, SiriusXM, and YouTube, just to name a few of the formats that you can catch us on here on Racers Odds. We will be here with you before every race throughout the rest of the playoffs to give you the information and the statistics you need to make the wise wagering decisions on NASCAR's top series. So once again, for Pat Patterson, Jeff Hammond, John Roberts, and Steve Makinen, and everybody else involved in the program here on Racers Odds, we want to say thanks for coming along for the ride. Sit back, enjoy the race, and we'll see you next week.
This has been Racers Odds, a presentation of TRN, the Performance Racing Network.